Welcome to the story of your deepest fears. Do you believe in things unseen? The whispers that call to you in the dead of night, the shadows that flicker when you least expect it, the presence that makes your skin crawl even when you're alone. If you do, then this tale is for you. Before we start, take a moment. Feel the air around you. Does it seem still, or do you feel something shifting? Something stirring in the silence, just out of reach. Settle in, because once you step into this story, there's no turning back. You'll never be able to shake the feeling that there's something waiting for you, watching. And as always, like the video, subscribe, and let's explore this together. But tell me, where are you from? And when does the night start to feel just a little too quiet for you? In the heart of the countryside, where the city lights seem like nothing more than a distant memory, there's a place that no one talks about. It's a house, old, decaying, forgotten by time, but not forgotten by something far older. The farmhouse, sitting nestled between the shadows of towering hills and an endless forest, is not the peaceful retreat one might imagine. It has secrets. And secrets always come with a price. This wasn't supposed to be my story. I came here for escape. A photographer, desperately seeking a new chapter, a fresh perspective. I thought the 19th century farmhouse was the perfect place to find inspiration, 40 acres of forgotten land untouched by human hands for decades. The price was too good to pass up. But something about the way the realtor spoke about the place sent chills down my spine. She avoided eye contact and glanced at the woods as if they were whispering her secrets. She told me the previous owners left because of family troubles. A vague, unsettling excuse. But I wasn't there for the history, I was there for solitude. A retreat. A haven from the noise, the chaos of city life. I should have listened to her fear. The first week was peaceful. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a comforting blanket. I fixed up the house, cleaning away the years of dust, replacing broken windows. But as I worked, something didn't feel right. The silence wasn't just quiet. It felt heavy. Oppressive. As if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. That's when I heard the whispers. At first, I thought it was nothing, a draft, perhaps. But as the days turned into nights, the whispers grew. Faint, soft, but unmistakable. My name, Martin, it floated through the air like a sigh, almost intimate in its familiarity. It wasn't the wind, wasn't the house settling. Something was there, something watching. I tried to shake it off, but the sound was relentless. The nights became unbearable. The whispers followed me into my dreams, haunted my waking moments. They were always just behind me, never seen, but felt. At times, they came from inside the walls, as if the very structure of the house was alive, breathing. I could hear my name, Martin, always calling. But it was never the same. Sometimes it was gentle, like a lullaby, and other times, it was harsh, angry, almost accusing. I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe the isolation was playing tricks on me, pushing me to the brink. So, I set up cameras, motion detectors, anything that would give me proof that I wasn't just imagining things. I reviewed the footage night after night. Nothing. Empty rooms. Cold, desolate spaces. But the whispers, they kept coming. Then, there was the presence. I could feel it in every room. A cold, suffocating air that pressed against me, made my chest tighten, made my breath shallow. It wasn't just the house, it was something inside the house. Something ancient, lurking in the corners of my vision, never fully revealed. It watched me. I continued with my work, photographing the decaying barn, the overgrown fields, the twisted oak trees that bordered the property. But through my lens, I saw things I couldn't explain. A shadow darting just out of sight. A face, barely visible in the corner of the frame. Each photograph felt like it was showing me a piece of something darker. But no one would believe me. They said I was seeing things. They said it was just the isolation. But the photographs, those blurred, distorted shapes, were proof. Then one afternoon, as I worked in the garden, I struck something solid with my shovel. At first, I thought it was just a rock. But as I dug deeper, I uncovered a small, old wooden box. It had strange symbols etched into the surface, symbols that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. My heart raced. I had to know what was inside. When I opened it, I found the amulet. A dark, circular stone, cold as ice, wrapped in leather. My fingers trembled as I touched it, feeling a chill run through my body. The note that came with it was barely readable, but the message was clear: do not disturb the amulet. It is meant to protect. If you remove it, you will release something that cannot be undone. It didn't make sense. Why would something so small, so insignificant, hold so much power? But the truth was undeniable. The whispers had changed. They were no longer whispers, they were voices, sharp, demanding. The darkness was no longer just in the walls, it had been set free. And so, here I am. The darkness is alive, and it isn't going anywhere. The house, the land, the amulet, it was all part of something much older, something that has always been here, waiting for someone like me to disturb it. The warnings were clear, but it was too late. Now, I must face it. The darkness. The presence that has always watched, always waited. It's too late for me, but maybe not for you. Because once you hear this story, once you feel that chill creep down your spine, you'll understand, some things should never be disturbed. You won't be able to forget it. It's not just a story. It's a warning. And the whispers, they're already coming for you. Curiosity has always been a double-edged sword. It draws you in, compels you to seek answers, to uncover secrets, to pry into places best left untouched. I should have known better, but the amulet, that cursed relic. I couldn't resist. The moment my fingers brushed against its cold surface, I felt a connection, an undeniable pull. The energy it emanated was like nothing I'd ever encountered before. It hummed, vibrated with life, and somehow, it called to me. I brought it into my studio, despite every warning etched in my mind, drawn by its allure. I should have left it buried. But instead, I photographed it obsessively, capturing its strange, dark beauty, the symbols that wriggled like they were alive, the shadows that clung to its edges, even when there was no light to cast them. But when I developed the photos later that night, my blood ran cold. Something in the frames wasn't right. There, in every photograph, something moved. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. But as I flipped through the images, my heart stopped. There, standing just behind me, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, was a figure. Its limbs were stretched, contorted, too long and too angular. Its face was nothing but voids, empty, blank eyes that reflected the camera's flash as though they were staring into my very soul. My pulse hammered in my chest, a panicked rhythm that drowned out every other sound. I spun around, heart racing, but the room was empty. I was alone, or so I thought. The whispers had been bad enough before. Soft calls in the night, my name carried on the wind. But that night, something changed. The whispers no longer sounded like faint echoes, they were real now, solid and clear, distorted into full sentences. Yet, they were twisted, like the voice of a broken radio, the words buzzing and garbled, incoherent. And the figure, it wasn't just a trick of the light. It was real. It was always here. Always watching. Always waiting. And I had opened the door. I had invited it in. I thought I could undo it. I thought that by sealing the amulet back into its box and burying it, I could reverse the damage. I dug the hole, trembling, my fingers shaking with an icy dread. The ground felt wrong beneath the shovel, as if the earth itself was resisting me. I buried the box, but I knew, deep down, that it was too late. The entity had been acknowledged, its presence confirmed. That was all it needed. It no longer needed the amulet. It no longer needed the box. It was inside now. The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more persistent. And the eyes, the cold, unblinking eyes, followed me everywhere. They were inside my head, inside my soul, never leaving. The next morning, I discovered something that made my stomach twist with horror. Handprints. They weren't small or delicate like those of a child. These were large, grotesque impressions, as if something had braced itself above me, leaning close, just inches from my face as I slept. The sight of them paralyzed me with fear. I reached for my camera, hoping, no, praying, that I was just seeing things. But when I peered through the lens, the handprints were gone. The ceiling was empty, as it had always been. I was alone again. Or so I thought. But that night, new handprints appeared. And then more the following night. They were different every time, shifting, stretching across the walls and ceiling like a grotesque map of my movements while I slept. Each time I woke, I would find them, always just above my head, as if whatever was leaving them had been watching me all along. I couldn't take it. The nights were endless, filled with terror. I turned to sleeping pills in a desperate attempt to escape the horrors that haunted me even in my dreams. But the pills only trapped me in a nightmare of paralyzing fear, where I couldn't move, couldn't scream, as the figure, crawled across the ceiling above me, its featureless white eyes staring at me unblinking. Forever watching. Forever waiting. 6 weeks had passed since I arrived at Blackwood Farm. I had tried to lose myself in my work, to focus on something, anything, that might offer some semblance of normalcy. So, I developed my latest set of landscape photographs. I hoped the beauty of the wild fields, the twisted trees, would calm my mind. But when I looked through the prints, I saw it again. The figure. It was there in every frame, lurking at the edge of the shot. Sometimes hidden behind the gnarled trunks of the trees, sometimes fully visible in the wide open fields, standing impossibly still, its empty eyes locked on mine. I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But it wasn't. It was real. The figure was real. And it was following me. Always following. Always waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. And that moment was coming. I could feel it. Every photograph I took, every frame I developed, seemed to bring the figure closer. It was no longer a mere shadow, no longer a whisper in the corner of my vision. It had substance now, form. In each new image, it stood more defined, its ghastly features clearer. Its skin was rough, like bark stretched over brittle bone, its limbs twisted at impossible angles, too long, too grotesque. Its eyes, those hollow, sightless voids, were locked on me, always staring directly into the lens. Always staring at me. A chill ran through my body as I realized that no matter where it stood, it was always watching me. At first, I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination. The fatigue of weeks alone in the farmhouse, the isolation, surely it had taken its toll on my mind. But the rational part of me was slowly crumbling, bit by bit, with each photograph. The figure became undeniable. It was real. And it was coming for me. I needed answers, answers that only the previous owners could provide. Desperation led me to scour county records, track down their names, and reach out. When the elderly woman answered the phone, there was no surprise in her voice. She seemed to know exactly why I was calling. As I recounted the horrors I'd experienced, I expected disbelief, perhaps a warning to stop my search. But instead, her voice dropped, hushed with a fear that I could feel through the phone. "Did you find something buried on the property?" she asked, her words slow, heavy with caution. When I described the amulet I had unearthed, there was a long silence. And then she spoke, softly, reverently, as though she were reliving a painful memory. Her family had been the caretakers of the farm for generations, but they weren't just farmers, she explained. They had a duty. They had followed rituals passed down through the ages to keep something contained. That amulet, the one I had foolishly unearthed, was one of many binding objects meant to keep the entity at bay. By removing it, even for a moment, I had weakened the fragile barriers that kept it contained. The floodgates were open now. And there was no going back. My stomach twisted in dread as I tried to process her words. "What exactly is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. There was a long pause. I thought she had hung up. Then, her voice returned, barely audible, as if she were speaking through the cracks in the earth itself. "They never gave it a name," she said. "To name it, would make it stronger. But the indigenous people, they knew of it long before the settlers came. They called this place the Watching Place." I froze at the words, a cold sweat trickling down my spine. The name, the Watching Place, echoed in my mind, resonating with the unease that had settled deep within me since I first arrived. The woman spoke quickly then, her voice trembling with fear. She told me she could never return to Blackwood Farm. But there was a way out, if it wasn't too late. She gave me a list of other binding objects hidden around the property, each one crafted to hold the entity in check. A silver mirror buried near the well. A box of bones beneath the oldest oak tree. A jar of preserved herbs inside the north wall of the barn. She explained that if I could find them and restore them in the proper arrangement, the barriers might be mended, the entity contained once again. I thanked her, my mind racing with possibilities, though every word she spoke only deepened my sense of dread. Was it too late? Had I already invited the entity into the world? With no time to waste, I set out to find the remaining binding objects. My camera was never far from my side, each photograph now a desperate attempt to document, to capture evidence of the entity's presence as it grew ever closer. The more I photographed, the more distinct it became, its form solidifying with each shot. The figure was no longer a blur, no longer a trick of light. It was tangible. It had substance. I began with the silver mirror, buried near the well. The woman's description had been accurate, tarnished but intact. I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was watching me, its surface reflecting nothing but darkness. It was a chilling omen. But it was only the first piece. The box of bones proved more difficult. The old oak tree, its gnarled roots buried deep in the earth, fought back against me as I dug. The soil seemed to resist every turn of the shovel, like the ground itself was trying to protect the secrets buried beneath it. When I finally unearthed the box, it was small, aged, and covered in a thick layer of dirt and moss. As I opened it, the smell hit me, a mixture of decay and something more, ancient. The bones inside were brittle, their edges jagged, as though they had been waiting for someone to find them. My hands shook as I closed the box, and for a moment, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper, like a sigh of relief. But the final object, the jar of herbs, remained elusive. Despite tearing apart sections of the barn wall, my hands bleeding from the sharp splinters of wood, the jar stayed hidden, as though mocking me, hiding just out of reach. The barn seemed to shift around me, the walls groaning under the weight of something unseen, as if the very structure were alive and aware of my presence. With every passing day, the figure grew closer. No longer a mere shadow, it had become something tangible, its form now visible in every photograph. I could see its skin, rough, like bark, its joints twisted in ways that defied nature. And its eyes, those empty, hollow eyes, never left me. The entity was coming. It was no longer just in the corners of my photographs. It was inside the house. It was inside me. Time was running out. It was last night, the night that shattered the fragile remnants of my sanity. I woke to the unmistakable sound of something wet, dripping, pacing. My heart leapt into my throat as I opened my eyes, only to be met by a sight that froze my blood in my veins. Wet footprints, far too large to be human, circled my bed. They were deep, grotesque impressions, each one leaving behind a thick, viscous substance that glistened in the moonlight. The water didn't look like water at all. It was darker, unnatural, like something foreign, something not meant to exist in this world. My breath caught in my chest as I followed the trail with trembling hands, flashlight darting nervously over the hardwood floor. The footprints led from the hallway, toward my bedside, and back again, an endless loop, as if something had been pacing in my room throughout the night. I swallowed hard, the air growing colder around me, thick with a presence that I could no longer deny. They led straight to the basement door. The basement door. I had locked it before I went to bed, yet there it was, wide open, gaping like a mouth, an invitation, a trap. The darkness beyond seemed alive, ready to consume me. I could feel the weight of it, the pull of something dark, something ancient, beckoning me into the depths. But I had no choice. The whispers, the figure, the images, they were all leading here. This was the moment. The point of no return. I stepped into the dark room, flashlight slicing through the black. The beam flickered, but I kept moving, pushing forward. The photographs. They were the key. But what I found made my blood run colder than any night I had spent in this house. Every photograph I had taken, the ones I thought I knew so well, had changed. The images that once held blurred shadows, strange figures lingering just beyond the edges of the frame, were now altered. The edges of the photographs twisted, distorted. And there, in the corner of the basement, standing in the shadows of the room, was the figure. The entity. It was no longer a vague shape in the background, a fleeting hint of something terrible just out of sight. No. It was there, right there, in every single photograph. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It wasn't hiding. It was staring directly at me, its eyes blank, white voids, reflecting the camera's flash, as though it had been there all along, watching me with those sightless, accusing eyes. But it wasn't just the figure that had changed. In each photo, there was me, only it wasn't me anymore. The face was mine, but twisted, contorted, wrong. My eyes were completely white, empty, hollow, voids that reflected nothing. My limbs, too long, stretched unnaturally, bent at angles that defied biology. My fingers, twisted, misshapen, grotesque. Each photograph was a distorted, unsettling reflection of what I had become. A grotesque mockery of myself. I stumbled backward, my mind spinning, and my breath caught in my throat as I stared at the developing table. It wasn't just the photographs. There, etched into the wood, was a message. I am you now. The words seemed to burn themselves into my mind, a horrific truth that I could no longer deny. The entity had taken me. It had twisted me, shaped me into something unrecognizable. It was no longer just in the house, it was inside me. A part of me. The line between us had blurred, and there was no escaping it now. The house, it felt different. The air was thick, oppressive, as though the walls themselves were closing in, constricting, suffocating me. I could feel the pressure building, like something was pushing me, forcing me to face what I had done. I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay for another moment. I grabbed my things in a panic, rushed outside into the cold night air, barely aware of the chill that raised goosebumps on my skin. My heart pounded as I scrambled for my car, slamming the door behind me and driving away without looking back. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that the farmhouse was still watching me. Its dark windows stared back, like empty, soulless eyes, eyes that were waiting, watching. And I knew, deep down, that it wasn't over. It wasn't over because it was already inside me. I haven't returned since. It's been 24 hours. My mind is a battlefield, rational thought warring with the terror that grips me. The rational part of me tells me I should call the police. Report a break-in. Have them search the property. But what would they find? Handprints on the ceiling? Edited photographs? Would they believe me? Would they write it off as stress, isolation, or worse, a mental breakdown? How could I explain that the house, the land, the very air around me wasn't just a collection of walls and wood? It was alive. It was watching. Waiting. Now, I sit in a sterile motel room, my camera beside me, its lens a silent witness to the horrors I can no longer face. I wonder, with growing fear, if I'll see those empty, white eyes staring back at me in the mirror. I don't dare look through the viewfinder anymore. Because I know, it is still there. Waiting. Watching. The entity. And it's inside me now, too. The call came this morning, shrouded in cold urgency. The elderly woman's voice was tinged with fear, her words clipped and sharp. She asked, in a tone I couldn't mistake for anything but desperation, if I had restored the bindings. I told her, hesitantly, that I hadn't found all the objects. There was a long silence on the other end before she hung up. No word, no warning. Just a click. The line went dead. Since that call, my phone has been dead. No service. No signal. Nothing. The eerie silence gnaws at my nerves, and still, something else tugs at me, something deeper than fear, something insidious and unexplainable. It feels as though I've left a piece of myself back at Blackwood Farm, but that's not the worst of it. It's worse than that. It feels as though something else has filled the void I left behind. The whispers, they follow me. They don't come from outside anymore. They come from within me, a constant murmur beneath my thoughts. It's as though it is in me now. The isolation is suffocating. I can't ignore it. I can't escape it. Tonight, I'm going back. I have to. I've convinced myself that I need to finish what I started. The herb jar is the last piece of the puzzle. If I don't complete the binding ritual, the entity will continue its slow crawl into my world, into my very being. I've been studying the photographs obsessively, tracing every subtle shift in the entity's position. At first, it was just a shadow, a fleeting figure at the edge of the frame. But it has moved closer, always closer, becoming more defined, more deliberate with each passing day. Its approach is methodical. I can feel it. There's a pattern, and I know it holds a message. I can feel it tightening around me, drawing me in. It's always closer now, always nearer to the center. But there's one detail, one haunting detail, that refuses to leave my mind. In the first photograph, the one where I held the amulet for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. It was subtle, almost too small to matter. But there it was, in the shadow cast on the wall. The shadow didn't match the form of the figure. The shadow was mine. It's impossible, of course. But that thought, that detail, won't leave me. It's as though a part of me has already been taken. The lines between the watcher and me are blurring, merging, and I can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. I don't know what awaits me at Blackwood Farm. Whether it's the entity, or answers, or something worse entirely. But I do know this, I can't run from it anymore. It has already marked me. It has already claimed me. The ritual may contain it. Or maybe it's already too late. As I pack my camera, the one tool that has borne witness to all of this, I feel a sense of purpose, a photographer's drive, unyielding. I need to document what happens next. No matter the cost. Because I know, deep down, that no matter where I go, it's already here. I glance at my reflection in the motel room mirror. For just a moment, my eyes don't look right. They're too bright, almost white, like the pale glow of the moon itself, unnatural against the dim light of the room. I blink, forcing my gaze to shift, to focus. It must be a trick of the light. Must be. But doubt gnaws at me, creeping into my thoughts, sinking deep into the marrow of my bones. The sun is setting now. The time to return is here. The first night I heard it, I knew something was wrong. It started as a tinkling melody, a soft, delicate tune, almost too soft to register at first. But something was off about it, a subtle unease that hung in the air like an invisible thread. The notes were clear, sharp, but they felt wrong, like they were out of place. Like they belonged somewhere else, somewhere darker. The melody hung in the air long after it should have faded into silence, lingering like the chill that crawls up your spine when you know you're being watched. It was my grandfather's music box, the one I'd inherited 3 weeks ago. I had always known it to be silent, its gears frozen with age, just like the rest of the house. A relic of the past, passed down through generations, its ornate walnut surface intricately carved with patterns of leaves and vines. When you looked at it under the right light, the carvings almost seemed to move, to shift, as if the wood were alive. I tucked it away on a shelf in my study, not giving it much thought, just another memento from the past. But at exactly 3:17 a.m., it decided to wake up. The gears turned, and with it, something else stirred. I lay there in bed, frozen, as the melody played, a delicate, haunting tune that shouldn't have been able to play, not in its condition. But there it was. And as it played, the air in the room shifted. The shadows grew longer, darker, like they were pulling in toward the source of the sound. And when the final note rang out, the house fell back into its unnatural silence. But it wasn't just the music box that woke up that night. I could feel it, the same cold sensation that I had felt at Blackwood Farm, the same unease, the same pull. It was as though the house itself had opened its eyes. I couldn't explain it, but the air felt thick, alive. And just like the whispers, the presence followed me, lingering on the edges of my thoughts, creeping in when I wasn't paying attention. The music box had been silent for days after I brought it home from my grandfather's estate. Its gears, rusted with time, should have remained still. But now, it was playing again. And I knew that whatever had been released when it started turning, it wasn't finished with me yet. The music box had been silent for days, its brass cylinder, once adorned with tiny pins, now lying dormant, untouched. But the sound had returned, creeping into the stillness of the night with an eerie persistence. The delicate metal tines plucked the air, creating a haunting melody that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't a lullaby, and it wasn't a song I could recognize. It was something else, something older, something that made my skin crawl. The lawyer who handled my grandfather's estate had mentioned nothing unusual about the house or its contents. He had been all business, handing over the standard paperwork, offering the keys with professional courtesy, and a quick mention that my grandfather had asked me to take special care of his collection. I had no reason to doubt him, of course. Why would I? But something in the back of my mind gnawed at me. The house, the music box, something about them felt off. I moved in 2 days later, unpacking and setting up my home office in the spare bedroom. The master bedroom I left untouched. I couldn't bring myself to sleep there, not in a dead man's bed, not when I barely knew him. Childhood visits had been rare, and in adulthood, they had dwindled to almost nothing. The last time I saw him was 5 years ago at a family reunion. He had seemed distracted, his hands constantly tapping out rhythms on the tablecloth, as if listening for something only he could hear. Something I didn't understand. I placed the music box on the mantel in the living room, beside some of his pocket watches and a few framed family photos. The first few nights passed uneventfully as I settled into my new routine, working remotely during the day, exploring the house and the surrounding property in the evenings. In the corner of the living room sat an old wooden rocking chair, which I assumed had once belonged to my grandmother, though she had passed long before I was born. The curved rails on its base were worn unevenly, as if someone had spent years rocking in a specific, deliberate pattern. I tried it once, but found it uncomfortable, the back too straight, the seat too hard, nothing like the rocking chairs I remembered from my childhood. Still, there was something about it. Something in the way it seemed to hum with an energy I couldn't name, a heavy silence that hung around it like a fog. I pushed the thought aside and returned to my work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the chair was watching me. On the fourth night, I woke to music. It was faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it was real. It was there. My heart hammered in my chest as I lay perfectly still, trying to identify the source. The melody was delicate, beautiful even, but something about it felt wrong, like a memory you can't quite recall, like an old dream slipping through your fingers just as you wake up. The notes were clear, but they dragged, slowing down each time, transforming what should have been a lullaby into something mournful, something desperate. It looped endlessly, echoing through the walls, filling the house with an icy chill that settled deep into my bones. I tried to dismiss it. The wind. The house settling. Anything but what I knew in my gut was true. But as I lay there, listening, I realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The music, I thought, was coming from the mantel. But no, it was coming from the rocking chair. The chair that hadn't moved. The chair that shouldn't have moved. I knew immediately what it was. The music box. But I hadn't touched it since I briefly examined it when I first arrived. There was no reason for it to be playing. My mouth went dry, my heart pounding as I felt the weight of the moment pressing on me. Every part of me resisted the pull to leave the warmth of my bed, but some instinct, some primal part of me, knew I had no choice. I had to go. I had to see. With trembling hands, I pushed myself out of bed. The cold wooden floor greeted me, sharp and biting beneath my bare feet. Each step felt like a battle as I forced myself to move toward the living room, drawn toward the source of the music, my heartbeat the only sound in my ears. The hallway stretched before me, darker than it should have been, despite the night light I'd plugged in near the bathroom. The shadows clung to the corners, twisting and writhing as I moved past them. As I reached the living room, the melody grew louder, the music box's haunting tune filling the air. The rocking chair sat in the corner, as still as I had left it, but something in the air had shifted. The room felt charged, as if the house itself had come to life. The chair, the music, the cold, it all converged in that one moment, pulling me into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I looked at the mantel. The music box was still there, untouched. It hadn't been wound, hadn't been moved. But the sound was unmistakable. It was playing. And it was coming from somewhere else now, from the very space around me, echoing like a ghost in the room. The walls seemed to hum with the rhythm, and for a split second, I could swear I saw the chair shift, just a little. A subtle creak of the wood, the faintest sway. But when I blinked, it was still. Still as the silence that followed the last note. A sickening realization crept into my mind. Something had been left behind when I inherited this house, something not quite right, something that didn't belong. It wasn't just the music box, or the rocking chair, or the house itself. It was my grandfather. Something about him, something he had hidden, something he had left for me, was here, and I was not prepared for it. And as I turned to leave, I heard it. A whisper, soft and low, carried on the wind, just behind me. Welcome home. The melody grew louder, reverberating through the house like a sinister lullaby, its notes stretching and bending in ways they weren't meant to. My heart raced as I gripped the banister, the cold wood pressing against my hand with a bone-deep chill. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step echoing in the silence that clung to the house. The living room was bathed in a pale, ghostly moonlight that filtered through the thin curtains, casting everything in an ethereal glow, as though the world itself had grown faint and fragile. And there it was. The music box, its lid open, its tiny brass mechanism turning steadily, gleaming like an unholy artifact in the darkness. But what truly froze the breath in my lungs wasn't the music box. It was the rocking chair. It had begun to move. Back and forth, in perfect time with the distorted, dragging melody. Empty. Yet not empty. A darkened silhouette sat there, an absence of light more than a presence. The outline of shoulders, a head, hands resting on the arms of the chair. But there were no features. No substance. No face. Just a vague shape, rocking slowly, endlessly, in time with the haunting rhythm. My throat constricted, my limbs frozen in place as I tried to scream, to call out, to do anything. But no sound came. The air itself had thickened, suffocating me, and the temperature in the room dropped so sharply that my breath was visible, fogging in the icy air before me. It felt like time itself had stretched, become brittle. I blinked hard, trying to shake the images away. My mind screamed that it was a trick, an illusion conjured by exhaustion, a sleep-deprived hallucination. But when I opened my eyes again, the chair had stilled. The silhouette, gone. As though it had never been there at all. But the music, it continued. Unrelenting. For exactly 37 more seconds, the melody dragged on, each note slower, more distorted, more agonizing. It stretched like a word that couldn't quite find its end, a sentence suspended in the air, incomplete. The final discordant note rang out, hanging there like an unanswered question, its unresolved echo filling the silence that followed. I didn't sleep again that night. When the morning light finally crept into the room, I tried to tell myself it had all been a vivid dream, a half-dream, a product of the restless, feverish mind struggling to make sense of an unfamiliar space. My grandfather's house was old. Creaky. It had its noises, its quirks. The wind howled outside, the drafts moved through the house, the walls groaned with the passing of time. The human mind, especially one transplanted into unfamiliar surroundings, naturally seeks patterns, explanations. I repeated these thoughts to myself like a mantra as I made coffee, the early dawn sky still purple with the last remnants of the night. I tried to bury the lingering sense of fear, to shove it down, to ignore it. But it clung to me, settled like an unwelcome guest in the pit of my stomach. That evening, I took precautions. I wound the music box fully, letting it play through its entire melody. I watched the second hand on my wrist as the notes filled the room, each one like a whisper from some forgotten corner of my mind. The song was familiar, impossibly so. It was like the tune had always been there, just waiting for me to remember it. It had a quality about it, something that made it feel like an old memory, but one I couldn't quite grasp. The last note lingered in the air, leaving a hollow space behind, and I counted the seconds. Exactly 2 minutes and 12 seconds. When it finished, I closed the lid firmly, placing a heavy book on top to ensure it stayed closed. Then, with a sigh of exhaustion, I set up my laptop on the coffee table, positioning its webcam directly at the music box and the rocking chair. I activated the motion detection software I used for home security, hoping that perhaps this time, the camera would capture some reasonable explanation. I convinced myself that nothing unusual would happen, that it was all in my head. I would prove it. I went to bed, determined to face whatever this was, to rationalize it. At 3:17 a.m., I woke again. The same melody, but slower this time, dragging each note like it was unwilling to leave the box. My skin prickled with gooseflesh, the sense of dread gnawing at my chest as I lay there, unable to move. The weight of fear pressed on me, settling into my bones. My limbs felt stiff, like they were made of lead. But the music beckoned. It called to me, a pull that I could no longer ignore. I forced myself out of bed, each step like wading through thick, freezing water. The house was silent, except for that melody, twisting through the dark like a rope pulling me down the stairs. I gripped the banister tightly, the wood cold beneath my fingers as I descended. The hallway stretched before me, darker than it should have been, despite the dim light from the night light near the bathroom. The air was thick, unnaturally still, and as I rounded the corner into the living room, I saw it. The rocking chair sat still in the corner, the music box untouched on the mantel. There was no silhouette, no dark figure. Yet the room felt alive, alive with the weight of something unspoken, something waiting. The seconds stretched out, and I forced myself to approach. The music played on, dragging its melody with agonizing slowness, filling the house with its impossible rhythm. Something was wrong, something fundamental had shifted, and I had no idea what it wanted. I looked at the webcam recording, my heart racing. What was I missing? The living room felt different. Colder. The chill seeped into my bones, making every breath sting like icy needles. The book I had placed so carefully on top of the music box now lay on the floor, as if it had been thrown aside in haste. The music box was open, its mechanism turning with agonizing slowness, each note emerging like a distant echo, dragging its melody through the air in a way that made my stomach churn. But what truly stopped me in my tracks was the rocking chair. It was moving again, back and forth, as if it had a purpose this time, a rhythm that matched the distorted tune of the music box. The silhouette sat there, just as before, but this time it was more defined, more solid. The outline of shoulders, the slight curve of an elderly posture, it was unmistakably human, but not quite. It felt familiar, a sense of recognition gnawing at the back of my mind, but something in me told me not to remember. I didn't want to remember. I glanced quickly at the laptop, my last hope of recording proof of this madness, only to find the screen black, lifeless. I could feel my heart plummet into my stomach. The motion detection software that had been running before I went to bed was completely gone. The laptop had been unplugged, though I distinctly remembered securing the power cord, making sure everything was in place. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, a wave of panic crashing over me. My mind screamed for me to move, but my body was slow, reluctant. I staggered toward the laptop, desperate to reconnect it, my fingers trembling, fumbling to press the power button. I hit it several times before the screen flickered to life with a soft hum, but when it finally illuminated, the recording software had shut down completely, without warning. As the screen cast its pale light into the room, the silhouette in the chair vanished, like smoke drifting away on the wind. The music box wound down, leaving behind the same unresolved final note that had haunted me since it first began playing. I stood there, frozen, my chest tightening as the silence filled the room. It was too still, too empty. I didn't sleep again that night. The harsh light of morning brought no comfort. It only magnified the sense of wrongness that lingered in every corner. I sat at the kitchen table, drinking lukewarm coffee and staring at the music box in front of me. I couldn't push the thought away, something was very, very wrong with it. With the house. With everything. But what? I ran my hand over the smooth surface of the box, examining it more carefully than before. The craftsmanship was exquisite, elegant curves, delicate carvings in the wood, but something about it felt too perfect, too purposeful, like it had been made to look beautiful, to pull me in. My fingertips traced the lid, and that's when I found it. A faded inscription, barely visible at first, etched into the wood, for Wilhelm. The melody remains unfinished until you complete it. I froze. Wilhelm. That wasn't my grandfather's name. His name was Thomas. Not Wilhelm. My grandfather had never mentioned anyone by that name. The realization crept in, cold and unsettling, as my mind raced to make sense of it. Had my grandfather acquired the music box from someone else? A previous owner, perhaps? A collector with a past I didn't know about? The questions piled on, each one more unnerving than the last, as if the more I uncovered, the more tangled the threads of this mystery became. Determined to find some answers, I set out the next day to buy more recording equipment. I couldn't afford to let the evidence slip away again. This time, I bought a digital camera with night vision, a voice recorder, and motion sensors, everything I could get my hands on, both battery-operated and plugged into the outlets, to make sure I wouldn't miss anything. I even set up my old smartphone, tucking it behind a book on the shelf with its camera peeking out, its lens trained directly at the music box and the rocking chair. That night, I could barely sleep. My mind was too alive with fear, anticipation, and the gnawing sensation that whatever had been waiting, whatever had been calling to me, was about to make itself known. I must have drifted off eventually, because once again, I was awakened, precisely at 3:17 a.m. The melody was different this time. Distorted. The notes barely connected, each one struggling to emerge from the box, like they were being suffocated by something. The air around me seemed to thicken, the weight of it pressing in, making it harder to breathe. It was as though the room itself was alive, suffocating under the weight of an unseen presence. I couldn't stay in bed. The music, as twisted as it was, had a pull, a magnetic force that tugged at me, making my limbs feel heavy, like I was walking through molasses. My skin prickled with gooseflesh as I forced myself out of bed and stumbled toward the stairs. The chill in the house hit me immediately. It was colder now, colder than it had ever been. My breath hung in the air, clouding in front of me like it was winter, but I could feel the oppressive heat of fear growing with every step. I descended the stairs slowly, each creak of the floorboards beneath my feet seeming to echo louder than the last. The living room was darker now, the light from the nightlight casting long, twisted shadows along the walls. But the music was louder, more insistent. Each note warped and bent, a painful sound that scraped against my nerves like fingers down a chalkboard. And there it was again. The rocking chair. It was moving, back and forth, in time with the broken melody. The silhouette sat there, more solid now, more real. I could almost make out the shape of the shoulders, the bend of the back, the hands resting on the arms of the chair. But there was something wrong with it. It was too familiar, yet it wasn't. I couldn't place it, but it was close, so close that I could feel it in my bones. I should know it. But I didn't want to. I reached for the camera, my hands trembling as I aimed the lens at the chair. The room seemed to close in around me, the air thick with something I couldn't see. I pressed the button, hoping that this time, I would have the proof I needed. The screen flickered, the night vision kicking in. The image was hazy at first, but then, in the faint green glow, I saw it. A figure. A shape. And in that moment, I realized with cold clarity, it wasn't just a shadow. It was someone. Someone I recognized. The silhouette in the rocking chair had grown more substantial. Its edges were sharper now, more defined. I could make out the wrinkled hands gripping the armrests, the hunched posture of age, as though the very essence of time had settled into it. The chair creaked with the slow, deliberate motion, rocking in sync with the tortured melody, each note dragging like an eternity stretching beyond comprehension. I stood frozen, unable to approach, unable to flee. The weight of fear paralyzed me, anchoring me in place as if the very room had become my prison. Then, the camera on the bookshelf emitted a high-pitched whine, followed by a dreadful silence. My heart skipped a beat. One by one, every recording device faltered and failed. The night vision camera's indicator light flashed erratically, flickered once, and then died. The room was filled with an oppressive silence, heavy with the sound of malfunctioning technology, as if something had reached out and smothered the electrical pulse of the world around me. All except for one device, the voice recorder. It sat on the mantel, closest to the music box, its tiny red light blinking steadily in the growing darkness. It was the last piece of functioning equipment, and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. My chest tightened as I strained to hear the music, the distorted melody tugging at my very soul, growing slower, more agonizing with each passing second. And then I heard it. Barely audible beneath the warped melody, a whisper, a voice, faint yet distinct, seeping into the room like a ghostly presence. Complete it. You must complete it. A chill ran through my body. My blood turned to ice. The voice was faint, papery, ancient. It carried a familiar cadence, one that triggered something deep within me. A memory, a feeling, something long buried. It sounded like my grandfather, but not the man I had known. No, this voice was much older, far older, and it carried a desperation that I had never heard from him. Complete what? I croaked, my voice barely rising above the agonizing, strained notes of the music box. And then, the silhouette in the rocking chair moved. The head turned slightly toward me, a slow, deliberate motion that made my breath catch in my throat. I couldn't make out any features, just darkness where a face should be, but I felt its gaze, cold and piercing, even in the absence of eyes. The rocking chair creaked with each motion, slower now, as if the figure in the chair had become aware of me. The music continued, its notes dragging, incomplete, desperate. My heart pounded as I realized that whatever was in that chair, whatever that presence was, knew me. The music box wound down, its final note hanging in the air, agonizing and unfinished. And as it faded, so did the silhouette. It dissolved like smoke, the figure vanishing into the ether until the rocking chair stood empty, once again. The room, once filled with sound, fell into eerie silence. The silence lingered, suffocating, like the air itself had become thick with the weight of what had just occurred. The next morning, my hands trembled as I retrieved the voice recorder. Every other device had malfunctioned, cameras showing nothing but static, motion sensors setting off false alarms throughout the night. But the voice recorder, it had captured something. Something that made my heart race and my hands shake with dread. When I played it back, beneath layers of electronic hiss and interference, the same words emerged: completed. You must complete it. The voice, the whisper, my grandfather's voice, echoing in the darkness. I had to know more. I couldn't ignore this any longer. I couldn't turn away from what was happening. I spent the day searching, scouring any information I could find on music boxes, particularly those with unfinished melodies or cryptic inscriptions. But what I found was inconclusive: old forum threads about collector's items, antique valuations, and cryptic stories about strange, elusive music boxes, but nothing concrete, nothing that made sense of what I was experiencing. By late afternoon, my mind turned back to my grandfather's personal papers. They had been in boxes I hadn't properly examined before, but now, I had no choice. There had to be an explanation, a clue, something that would give me some sense of control over the mounting terror. I sorted through the papers, sifting through old letters and photographs, until I came across a thin folder tucked away in the back. It contained correspondence with a German craftsman named Wilhelm Schreiber. The letters dated back to the 1970s, discussing the commission of a custom music box, a box with a specific melody. As I read through the letters, one stood out. It was from Schreiber, dated a month before his reported death. It mentioned that the music box was nearly complete, but the final sequence of the melody was still missing. That sequence, Schreiber wrote, would be provided upon delivery. The final sequence. The missing piece. I felt my heart begin to race as I realized what was happening. My grandfather had been involved with this music box, this creation, but he hadn't finished it. The melody was still incomplete. The voice from the recorder, the whisper urging me to complete it, it wasn't just some cryptic message. It was a warning. A command. I had to finish it. But the more I thought about it, the more it became clear, I wasn't just being asked to finish the song. I was being asked to finish something much darker. Something far more dangerous. And I didn't know if I could. At the bottom of the letter, my grandfather's familiar handwriting scrawled a final, haunting note: never received final sequence. Wilhelm died before completion. A chill ran down my spine as the connections began to form in my mind. My grandfather had commissioned the music box from a man named Wilhelm Schreiber, the same name etched into the inscription on the box. But Wilhelm had died before completing the melody. Had my grandfather somehow acquired the box despite this? And if he had, was the unfinished nature of the melody somehow keeping Wilhelm tethered to the world? The thought gnawed at me, a dark, insidious idea I couldn't shake. If the melody was left incomplete, could it have caused something to linger, something unfinished, something that had no way of passing on, no way of resting? I couldn't wait any longer for answers. I had to see it through. That night, I placed the music box directly across from the rocking chair, positioning it on the coffee table so I could watch both objects from the chair I had positioned myself in. I left all the lights on in the room, the stark brightness a fragile shield against the darkness that had already started creeping into my life. I sat, waiting. I knew what would happen, or at least, I thought I did. At precisely 3:17 a.m., the music began to play. But this time was different. The box hadn't been wound. It started as it always did, normal, beautiful, a quiet lullaby, but soon, it slowed. The notes began to drag, stretching painfully, becoming distorted, much like they had before. The room around me seemed to constrict with each aching, out-of-tune note. The lights flickered and dimmed, then stabilized at a fraction of their usual brightness, casting shadows that seemed to linger a bit too long, to move when they shouldn't. And then, the rocking chair. It was there again. More solid than ever before, the silhouette loomed in the dimness, its edges crisp and distinct. The figure was an elderly man, his face deeply lined with age, spectacles perched on a thin nose, white hair combed neatly to one side. He looked familiar, so familiar, yet there was something about him that was also deeply unfamiliar. His eyes, dark and unblinking, seemed to gaze right through me, as though I were the one who no longer belonged in this world. The stare was cold, dispassionate, and filled with an unbearable sorrow that pierced through the veil of reality. I couldn't breathe. My throat felt tight, constricted. The music, distorted and unfinished, continued to drag itself through the space, as though it were pulling something from the very air itself, sucking the life from the room. The figure in the chair remained still, unmoving. But as I stared at it, I began to wonder, was this what my grandfather had become? Had the unfinished melody, the incomplete piece of music, bound him to the world in some unnatural way, anchoring his spirit to this house? Had my grandfather, in his quest to complete something beautiful, unknowingly trapped himself, left unable to pass on? The chair was empty again when I blinked. The silence that followed was deafening. The figure had vanished, dissolved like smoke, leaving only the rocking chair in its wake, swaying slowly in time with the fading music. The room was eerily still, the melody winding down with that unresolved final note, the one that always seemed to linger, unfinished. I couldn't move. The answer I had been searching for had come, but it had only opened more doors. Whatever Wilhelm had left behind, whatever he had started and never finished, it had taken root in this house. It had been waiting for someone to complete it, and now, I understood. I had been the one who was supposed to finish it. The melody. The song. The ritual. But I didn't know how. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I spent the entire night staring at the empty chair, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest, until the first light of morning slowly poured into the room. I didn't sleep. I didn't even want to. The next morning, I retrieved the voice recorder, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Every other recording device had malfunctioned, cameras showing nothing but static, motion sensors triggering false alarms in the dead of night. But the voice recorder, it had captured something. Something I couldn't escape. When I played it back, the same words emerged, layered beneath the static, whispering through the hiss of interference. Complete it. You must complete it. The voice was unmistakable. It was my grandfather's voice, just as it had been the night before. But it was different now. It was hollow, strained, desperate. I needed to know more. I couldn't stop now. I had to understand what was happening. I spent the day searching, researching anything I could find about unfinished music boxes, about cryptic melodies that held people or spirits in a suspended state. But everything I uncovered only deepened the mystery. Stories of cursed objects, folklore of spirits bound to music, and collectors who spoke of pieces they had never fully understood. But no answers. Nothing concrete. By late afternoon, I turned to my grandfather's personal papers, boxes I had yet to truly examine. They had been tucked away, forgotten for too long, but now, I had no choice. I had to search for answers, to find the missing piece of the puzzle. As I rifled through his belongings, I found a thin folder that seemed out of place. Inside were letters, letters between my grandfather and a German craftsman named Wilhelm Schreiber. The letters dated back to the 1970s, discussing the commission of a custom music box, a box with a specific melody. As I read through them, one letter stood out. It was from Schreiber, dated a month before his death. He wrote that the music box was almost finished, but the final sequence of the melody was missing. That sequence, the final note, would be provided upon delivery. But Wilhelm had died before he could deliver it. I closed the folder with a trembling hand. My grandfather had commissioned a song, a melody that was never meant to be finished. But it was now, and it was tethering something to this world.